I intend to deceive the Duke. Julian stopped outside the half-open estate office, the words striking harder because they came from the woman he was contracted to marry. Dressed as an under-footman, he had entered Ashcombe Hall, expecting to expose a fortune hunter. Now Clara stood over the marriage papers with a penknife in one hand and a replacement page in the other. Her companion went pale. Changing a legal settlement is forgery. So is the page already inside it. Clara held both sheets against the candlelight. The watermarks matched, but one bore a thin blue fibre beneath the Duke of Rothmere's wax seal, a material used only in county relief documents. Someone had attached his crest to a schedule transferring the widow's fund into the Ashcombe debts. If Rothmere signs the false page, he becomes part of the theft, Clara said. If I substitute the true accounts, they will call me a criminal. I would rather he despise me than unknowingly ruin 38 families. Julian had come to discover whether his future wife could be trusted. Instead, he had heard her preparing to sacrifice herself to protect him. He remained motionless in the dim passage, one hand gripping the edge of the silver tray he had been carrying as part of his disguise. Through the narrow opening, he could see Clara's profile in the candlelight, composed, almost severe, though the fingers holding the penknife trembled once before, becoming still. She was not the beauty described in her uncle's letters, nor the eager bride Julian's solicitor had warned him to expect. Her dark hair was drawn back without ornament, and the cuffs of her brown gown had been carefully turned to conceal wear. Nothing about her suggested a woman anticipating a ducal fortune. She looked instead like someone standing at the edge of a cliff and measuring the distance to the rocks below. The other woman, Miss Lydia Vale, Clara's widowed companion. According to the household register Julian had studied, closed the office door another inch. Your uncle controls the servants, the magistrate, and every account kept in this house. Even if you replace the page, he will claim you altered the settlement for your own benefit. He may claim what he likes after the widow's money is returned. And when the Duke repudiates you, Clara lowered the papers. For the first time, the calmness left her face. Then, at least he will repudiate me for something I chose. The words unsettled Julian more than the threat of forgery. He had spent the journey to Ashcombe Hall, imagining the woman behind the contract, an ambitious provincial lady, delighted to exchange obedience for rank. Perhaps coached by a guardian desperate to place his debts beneath a ducal seal. Julian knew the kind of bargain he was making. His late brother's reckless investments had left 3 Rothmere estates bound to loans due before winter, and the marriage portion attached to Clara's maternal inheritance would prevent hundreds of tenant families from being displaced. He required her money. Her uncle required his influence. Neither side had pretended it was love. Yet Clara spoke as though she possessed almost no power within the agreement, not even the right to refuse disgrace on her own terms. A floorboard shifted beneath Julian's boot. Lydia turned toward the door. Clara moved faster. She folded the genuine account page, slipped it into the narrow pocket sewn inside her sleeve, and placed the suspected forgery beneath the marriage contract. When she pulled the door open, Julian had only enough time to lower his eyes and adopt the deferential posture of a servant. Clara studied him. Her gaze passed over the plain coat supplied by his valet, the borrowed tray and the white linen wrapped around his hand. Julian had stained the bandage with a little horseblood to explain why a newly hired footman would be excused from heavy work. Most people saw what rank trained them to see. Clara looked at the mud dried unevenly on his boots, then at the unmarked skin above his collar, where years of outdoor labour should have left a line. "You are new," she said. Arrived this morning. Miss. From where? The Duke's travelling household. It was close enough to the truth to come easily. Lydia's alarm sharpened. But Clara gave no sign that she had been discussing the man who supposedly employed him. Then you know whether His Grace has already reached the village. He is expected tomorrow. Her shoulders relaxed by a fraction. Has his solicitor come with him? No. Miss. That answer displeased her. She looked back toward the desk, where Rothmere's seal shone dark red beneath the candles. Julian followed her gaze and noticed something he had missed from the passage. The seal impression was convincing, but its lower edge carried a shallow diagonal cut, as though the wax had been lifted whole from another document and pressed into place while warm. Clara saw him notice. For one suspended moment, the servant and the future Duchess regarded each other across the threshold. Julian wondered whether she would order him away, threaten him, or attempt to purchase his silence. Instead, she stepped into the passage and quietly shut the office behind her. If you truly serve the Duke, she said, tell him not to sign anything presented by my uncle until he has examined the seal himself. Why not tell him yourself? My uncle will ensure I am never alone with him. Then refuse the marriage. A bitter trace of amusement crossed her face. A woman may refuse a proposal. Refusing a contract her guardian has tied to her home, her companion's livelihood, and 38 families' winter provisions is a more complicated liberty. Julian felt the rebuke, although she did not know she was delivering it to the man responsible for the contract. He had considered the arrangement distasteful but necessary. Until that moment, he had not considered how necessity might look from her side. Heavy footsteps sounded at the far end of the corridor. Clara's uncle, Sir Edmund Ashcombe, appeared beneath the archway, broad-shouldered and silver-haired, carrying the confident irritation of a man accustomed to obedience. His eyes moved from Clara to Julian, then settled on the closed office door. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Julian bowed over the tray. "Lost my way to the dining room." "Sir." Sir Edmund dismissed him with a flick of 2 fingers. But his attention remained fixed on Clara. "The settlement has been prepared. You will sign it before dinner. I was told the Duke would witness my signature. The Duke will accept what I place before him." The statement was too certain. Clara heard it as well. Julian saw the change in her expression, not fear, but recognition. Sir Edmund did not merely expect Rothmere to overlook the altered page. He believed the Duke had already been made unable to challenge it. Clara lowered her head as though yielding. "Of course." "Uncle." Sir Edmund took her arm and led her away. As she passed Julian, the folded corner of the hidden account page slipped briefly from her sleeve. She pressed it back with 2 fingers, but not before he saw a column of names and, beside the final entry, a date written 3 weeks in the future. The money had not yet been stolen. The false settlement was not concealing an old crime. It was preparing one. Sir Edmund did not release Clara's arm until they reached the morning room, where the curtains had been drawn despite the thin afternoon light. A fire burned low in the grate, more smoke than warmth, and on the writing desk waited a fresh quill beside the settlement. He placed her in the chair as though positioning a troublesome object. "You will sign before dinner," he said. "There will be no further examination of the papers. No questions before the servants, and no private conversation with Rothmere. Your duty is to secure this family's future." Clara looked at the document, but did not reach for the pen, and the widow's future Sir Edmund's expression hardened. "Their allowances are a county matter. The settlement transfers the county fund into Ashcombe liabilities. You misunderstand legal language. I understand columns. The words escaped more sharply than she intended. He bent toward her, one hand flattening on the desk. Your mother encouraged that vanity. She permitted you to believe that copying figures made you capable of judging men who govern estates. It did not. Clara kept her gaze on the diagonal cut beneath Rothmere's seal. Her mother had done far more than teach her to copy figures. For 12 years. While illness kept Lady Miriam Ashcombe from attending the County Relief Committee, she had dictated every account to Clara rents forgiven after fever. Coal purchased for soldiers' widows, grain measured against household size. Signatures compared when frightened women marked receipts with crosses. By 16, Clara could balance 2 books kept by different clerks and find the missing shilling between them. By 18, she knew the watermarks of every stationer used by the committee and the blue flax mixed into the coarse paper reserved for public relief schedules. Sir Edmund had called such knowledge unbecoming when he became her guardian. He had nevertheless used it whenever his steward's figures failed to agree. I shall sign what is true, she said. You shall sign what preserves Ashcombe Hall. His restraint broke only for an instant. The hand on the desk curled, and Clara saw the pale line where a signet ring had recently been removed. Sir Edmund always wore the Ashcombe seal. He had once told her that a gentleman without his ring looked as naked as a soldier without a sword. Today the finger was bare. He straightened before she could stare too long. Lydia will remain in her room. You will have no access to the estate office. If you attempt to interfere again, I shall dismiss her without a character. That threat succeeded where anger had not. Lydia's late husband had left debts but no property, and no household would employ a companion accused of disloyalty. Clara's marriage portion might save Ashcombe Hall, but it did not belong to her until the wedding was complete. Even then, the contract placed its administration under her husband's authority. She had no independent fortune with which to protect Lydia, no legal standing over the widow's fund, and no relative willing to oppose Sir Edmund. Clara lowered her eyes. May I prepare for dinner? He mistook the question for surrender. You may. She left by the east corridor rather than return to her chamber. At the turn above the servants' stairs, she slipped through a narrow door swollen by damp and climbed into the abandoned schoolroom beneath the roof. No one had used it since her younger cousins died of scarlet fever. A cracked slate still leaned beside the cold hearth, and faded maps curled away from the walls. Clara had claimed the room years ago because Sir Edmund considered it useless. Beneath a loose floorboard lay the only records she trusted copied rent rolls, old relief schedules, samples of paper, and 3 notebooks written in the private shorthand her mother had devised when pain made dictation difficult. Lydia was already there. He has confined me, she said. Very ceremoniously, Clara drew the genuine account page from her sleeve. Then we have until someone remembers this room exists. They spread the page beside an older widow's schedule. The handwriting on both was Clara's, because 6 months earlier Sir Edmund had ordered her to prepare the annual list of allowances. She remembered every name. Mrs. Bell required coal because her eldest son had lost an arm at Corunna. Hannah Pike had 5 children and no milk cow. Mary Venn lived alone near the north boundary and could not walk to the parish without help. Yet the figures beside their names were not the figures Clara had entered. Each allowance had been doubled, then marked for transfer into consolidated Ashcombe obligations upon completion of the Rothmere marriage settlement. Lydia touched the future date. Perhaps he means to borrow the money and replace it. No. Clara compared the ink under the window. The figures were added later, but the transfer instruction was written at the same time as the original list. He planned this before the Duke's proposal was accepted. What can you prove? Not enough. She opened the oldest of her mother's notebooks and found the committee code for disbursement receipts. Every payment required 2 independent marks, the recipient's signature or witnessed cross, and a numbered tally cut by the parish clerk. Sir Edmund could alter a page, but he could not create 38 matching tallies without access to the relief chest. The brass key Clara had entrusted to the young clerk opened that chest. Lydia read her thought. You must send Belle away with it. If Belle disappears, my uncle will call him a thief. His mother loses her allowance, and the magistrate will search every house in the parish. Then what will you do? Clara looked toward the small tin box beneath the desk. Inside lay the only thing of value her mother had left, entirely in her control. A pair of pearl earrings and £46 saved from years of household allowances. It was enough to carry Clara and Lydia to London if the marriage failed. It was also enough to purchase coal for the widows before the first hard frost. She counted £30 into a linen purse and pressed it into Lydia's hands. Take this to Mr. Soapslew, Wren at the North Yard. Tell him the order comes from me, not the estate. Have the coal delivered before dawn. Clara, this is your escape money. If Sir Edmund intends to empty the fund, there may be nothing delivered after the settlement, and if he discovers what you have done, he will know I no longer intend to be frightened quietly. A bell sounded below, followed by the opening of the courtyard gates. Clara crossed to the narrow attic window. A wagon had entered beneath the Ashcombe arch, carrying 6 locked chests stamped with the Duke of Rothmere's crest. The disguised servant she had questioned stood beside them, speaking to the driver with an ease no under-footman should have possessed. Lydia joined her. Perhaps they contain the Duke's wedding gifts. Clara watched Sir Edmund hurry into the courtyard without his signet ring. He gave the driver no receipt, examined no inventory, and ordered the chests taken directly to the estate office he had forbidden Clara to enter. Then she saw the lettering painted beneath Rothmere's crest. County Relief, Winter Grain. The official accounts claimed the grain would not be transferred for another 3 weeks. It had already arrived. Clara waited until Sir Edmund followed the last chest into the estate office, then drew the attic curtain across the window. The grain is not meant to be here, she said. Not under that date, and not under Rothmere's crest. Lydia still held the purse of coal money. Then perhaps the Duke sent it early. A duke may send grain early. He does not alter county accounts 3 weeks before delivery, unless someone wishes the books to show that the grain arrived after it has already vanished. Clara gathered the copied schedules, returned all but one to the space beneath the floorboard, and placed her mother's oldest notebook inside her bodice. The small code book had no legal authority, but it contained the numbering sequence used for county stores during the last 12 years. If the chests were genuine, their iron inventory plates would match that sequence. If they did not, someone had borrowed Rothmere's crest to make private cargo appear official. They descended separately. Lydia returned to her room under the pretense of obeying confinement, while Clara crossed through the laundry passage and entered the north yard by the linen door. The wagon remained beneath the arch. Its driver stood drinking ale with 2 stablemen, his attention fixed on a story involving a broken axle and an innkeeper's daughter. Clara kept a folded sheet of household orders in one hand, so that anyone watching might assume she had been sent to inspect provisions. She had learned long ago that confidence opened more doors than permission. The disguised servant was no longer beside the wagon. That unsettled her. though she could not have said why. One chest remained on the cart. Its lid bore the Duke of Rothmere's crest branded into the wood, but the iron inventory plate had been fastened low against the rear panel, where rain and mud obscured the numbers. Clara set one foot on the wheel and reached upward. The plate read R4719. Her mother's codebook listed the present winter grain allotment as R51 through R56. Number 47 belonged to a shipment of lamp oil sent to Rothmere's southern estate 4 years earlier. The chest had been relabelled. Clara scraped mud from the iron with the edge of her fingernail. Around one screw lay a crescent of pale wood, fresh and raw against the darkened oak. The plate had been removed recently. Beneath it, pressed into the grain of the timber, was the faint outline of a longer plate with 2 additional holes. Whatever the chest had carried before, it had not belonged to this shipment. "You will tear your glove." She nearly lost her footing. The new servant stood on the opposite side of the wagon, his injured hand still wrapped in linen. Up close, the disguise seemed less convincing than it had in the corridor. His coat fitted too well across the shoulders, and although he held himself with deliberate humility, his voice retained the expectation of obedience. Clara stepped down. "You walk quietly for a man who claims to be lost in houses, and you climb wagons for a woman expected to be preparing for dinner. Then we are both neglecting our duties." His gaze moved to the inventory plate. "What did you find? A reason to ask who loaded these chests? The driver says they came from Rothmere land. The driver may believe it. You do not." Clara considered lying. The man served the Duke, or claimed to, and any accusation spoken too soon might reach Sir Edmund before she could prove it. Yet he had noticed the seal in the office without prompting, and he had not warned her uncle. This number belonged to another cargo. She said, "The plate was moved. The crest was added later." He examined the screw marks without touching them. "You can determine that from 4 digits. From the digits, the spacing, and the wood beneath them." She tapped the chest. "Public stores use longer plates because the parish code is included. This one carries only an estate code. Someone cut away the original plate and replaced it with a shorter one. What would be gained if the books show county grain entering Ashcombe custody? Then the grain can be charged to the widow's fund. If the chest contains something else or is emptied before distribution, the loss appears to have occurred after lawful delivery." His expression changed so slightly another person might have missed it. Clara did not. The servant had understood the implication too quickly. "You know more of estate accounts than most footmen," she said. "And you know more of freight than most ladies. My mother taught me to distrust any number that arrives dressed as fact." A shout rose from the stable. The driver had discovered a split harness strap and called for assistance. Clara turned toward the commotion, then saw a narrow wooden token lying in the mud beneath the wagon. It was no larger than her thumb, pierced at one end and threaded with faded yellow cord. She picked it up before a wheel could crush it. One face bore the carved number 12. The other carried a shallow symbol, resembling a crown with one point broken away. The servant's eyes fixed upon it. "You recognize this?" Clara said. "No." The answer came too quickly. She closed her fingers around the token. County grain tallies were cut from ash and threaded with blue cord. Yellow cord belonged to private carriers. The broken crown was not Rothmere's crest. It was the mark of Vane and Company, a warehouse firm Sir Edmund had once condemned as unreliable after 3 sacks of flour arrived underweight. The driver glanced toward them. His easy expression vanished when he saw the token in Clara's hand. He abandoned the damaged strap and crossed the yard. That fell from nowhere of consequence. Miss, then you will not object if I keep it. His eyes shifted toward the estate office windows. Sir Edmund ordered all cargo marks returned with the wagon. Clara slipped the token into her sleeve. Then Sir Edmund may ask me for it himself. The driver's mouth tightened. Before he could answer, Sir Edmund appeared in the doorway. He looked first at Clara, then at the chest, then at the mud disturbed around the inventory plate. Whatever uncertainty had touched, his face disappeared behind a smile. "My dear Clara," he called, "how fortunate. We have just discovered an error in the grain delivery, and I require your practised hand to correct the inventory." He had never praised her accounting skill in front of another person. Clara looked at the false plate, the fresh screw marks, and the place where the yellow token had lain. Sir Edmund was not merely hiding the shipment from her. He had expected her to find the discrepancy, and now he intended to make her handwriting part of it. Clara followed Sir Edmund into the estate office without surrendering the yellow token concealed in her sleeve. The 6 chests had been arranged beneath the windows, their false Rothmere brands facing outward as neatly as actors presenting themselves to an audience. 2 parish overseers stood beside the desk, along with Mr. Harley, the local magistrate, whose approval would give the inventory the appearance of public authority. Young Bell waited near the wall with his face drained of colour. The brass relief chest key hung from a cord at his waist, exactly where Clara had instructed him not to keep it. Sir Edmund had placed every necessary witness in the room before summoning her. "My niece has managed these lists since her mother's illness," he announced. "She will correct the copying error and certify that the winter grain has been received in full." He offered Clara the quill with a smile intended for the magistrate rather than for her. Beside it lay a prepared receipt stating that 6 chests containing 180 sacks of grain had been inspected. Weighed and transferred into Ashcombe custody, Clara looked at the locked boxes. No sack had been seen. No chest had been opened. The stated weight would have required twice the number of horses that had pulled the wagon into the yard. "The receipt is inaccurate," she said. One of the overseers cleared his throat. Sir Edmund's smile remained fixed. "The driver has supplied the quantities." The driver supplied 6 sealed chests. "This paper certifies their contents." "Mr." Hale shifted impatiently. "Do you dispute the Duke of Rothmere's mark?" "Miss Ashcombe, I dispute the arithmetic." Clara set the receipt beside a blank sheet. A chest, large enough to contain 30 grain sacks, could not be unloaded by 2 men without a hoist. These were carried inside by hand. Sir Edmund's fingers tightened around the back of her chair. "You observed them from an attic window." "I presume." "An excellent angle from which to judge weight." Clara met his eyes. He knew about the schoolroom or guessed enough to frighten her away from it. She glanced at Bell. The clerk stared at the floor, but one cheek was swollen. Sir Edmund had questioned him before Clara arrived. She took the quill. "I will record what can be verified." On the blank page she wrote that 6 locked chests bearing Rothmere's crest had entered the yard at 4:20 in the afternoon, that the contents had not been opened, counted or weighed in her presence, that one inventory plate showed recent removal, and that custody had passed directly from the unnamed carrier to Sir Edmund Ashcombe. She sanded the ink, signed only as witness to delivery, and pushed the page toward Mr. Harley. The magistrate read it twice. "This does not certify the grain." "No, sir, it certifies the chests." Sir Edmund reached for the paper, but Clara placed her hand over it. Mr. Hale should retain the original. Sir Edmund may keep a copy. A soft sound came from the doorway. The disguised servant had entered carrying a coal scuttle, though the room's fire had already been built. His face remained properly blank. But Clara saw approval in the brief lift of his gaze. Sir Edmund saw only an under-footman and ordered him to wait. Mr. Hale appeared more offended by inconvenience than troubled by fraud. Yet Clara had given him a document he could not safely ignore. "The locks must be opened," he said. "If the contents agree, the matter ends. The parish relief key." Sir Edmund replied, turning toward Bell. Bell's hand flew to the cord at his waist. Clara understood at once. The chests did not use the parish key. Sir Edmund wanted Bell to attempt them publicly, fail, and appear responsible for bringing the wrong key or for substituting it after stealing the correct one. "I have the key," Clara said. Every face turned toward her. Bell looked up in shock. Sir Edmund's expression became utterly still. Clara reached into her pocket and produced not the brass archive key, which remained on Bell's cord, but the smaller household key to her mother's old document chest. From across the room, their shapes were similar enough to support the lie for several seconds. "You removed it without authority?" Sir Edmund asked. "I removed a key because the relief records were being altered." Bell understood. His hand closed over the real key and slipped it beneath his coat while attention remained on Clara. Sir Edmund held out his palm. "Give it to me." "No." The word landed with more force than she expected. Sir Edmund's public mask cracked. "You will remember whose roof shelters you, and you will remember whose signature you require." Silence spread through the office. Clara had never used the marriage settlement as leverage before, because doing so made her feel no better than the men who treated it as a purchase. Now she accepted the ugliness of the weapon and used it carefully. No chest is opened, moved or entered as grain until the Duke or his authorized solicitor witnesses it. If that condition is refused, I will not sign the settlement. Mr. Hale looked alarmed. The overseers looked suddenly attentive. Sir Edmund could bully a dependent niece in private. He could not explain before witnesses why he feared a duke inspecting cargo marked with that duke's own crest. At last he smiled. "A sensible precaution. Precisely why I asked Clara to examine the inventory. The theft was so swift that for a moment even Clara almost admired it. Her refusal became his caution. Her written objection became proof of his responsible management." He turned to Mr. Hale and spoke warmly of transparency, county duty, and the advantages of having a meticulous niece. By the time the meeting ended, Sir Edmund had credited himself with ordering the chests sealed until Rothmere's arrival. Julian listened from beside the hearth, anger gathering beneath his borrowed clothes. He had watched men claim women's labour before, but never with such polished ease. More troubling was the difference between Sir Edmund's explanation and Clara's exact language. She had not accused wildly. She had separated observation from inference, preserved custody in writing, and forced independent possession of the record. Julian had come to Ashcombe Hall, believing he must protect himself from a calculating bride. Instead, he found himself measuring the courage required for her to tell the truth inside a room arranged to punish it. When the others departed, Clara moved past him into the corridor. He followed with the empty scuttle. "You gave them the wrong key," he murmured. She did not slow. "You noticed? The clerk still has the real one. For the moment, you placed yourself in his danger. He has a mother and 2 sisters who depend upon his wages, and you do not. Clara stopped near the servant's stair. Dependence does not excuse cowardice. The answer struck something Julian had kept unnamed for years. His father's ruin, his brother's death, and the debts of Rothmere had taught him to call every harsh decision necessary. Clara had just drawn a line between necessity and surrender, and she had done it while risking far more than he had understood. She removed the yellow token from her sleeve. The carrier belongs to Vane and Company. I need to know why a warehouse firm banned from county contracts transported chests under Rothmere's crest. Julian studied the broken crown carved into the wood. He recognized it now, not from freight records, but from a sealed demand among his late brother's papers. Vane and Company held one of the loans threatening the Rothmere estates. Before he could answer, a door opened behind them. Sir Edmund stood at the end of the passage, watching Clara place the token in the servant's hand. His pleasant expression did not alter, but his bare signet finger tapped once against the doorframe. That evening, he summoned the magistrate back to Ashcombe Hall and reported that his niece had conspired with a servant to forge the Duke's cargo records. The magistrate returned before the household had finished dinner, accompanied by 2 constables and carrying the authority of a man who had already decided which explanation would require the least courage. Clara was summoned to the drawing-room, where Sir Edmund stood beside the fireplace, with one hand resting on the mantel and the other concealed behind his back. Mr. Hale did not invite her to sit. On the table lay the yellow carrier's token, a narrow blade used for lifting wax seals, and the written statement Clara had forced him to retain that afternoon. Sir Edmund reports that you attempted to alter cargo records belonging to the Duke of Rothmere, he said. He further reports that you enlisted a servant attached to his Grace's household and removed a key from the county relief office. Clara looked toward the door. The disguised servant stood between the constables, his borrowed coat unbuttoned and his injured hand newly bound. Someone had searched him. The yellow token had been taken from his pocket, exactly where Clara had placed it. His face remained controlled, but the authority she had sensed in him had vanished beneath a servant's silence. The token proves the wagon came through Vane and Company, Clara said. It does not prove forgery. Sir Edmund brought his hidden hand forward. In his palm lay a broken disc of red wax bearing half of Rothmere's crest. This was found beneath a loose board in Clara's private schoolroom. Lydia, standing under guard near the windows, made a sound of disbelief. Clara did not. She studied the fragment instead. A thin blue fibre ran through its centre. It had been cut from a county relief document, just like the seal attached to the false settlement. Sir Edmund had planted evidence that appeared to confirm the very fraud she had discovered. Mr. Hale lifted the seal with the corner of a handkerchief. Do you deny using this to mark the chests? The brands on the chests were burned into wood, not made with wax. Do not evade the question. I deny possessing that seal, altering the cargo plates, or forging the Duke's authority. Clara turned to Sir Edmund. I also deny that you found it in the schoolroom unless you knew where to look before entering. His expression conveyed patient sorrow. My niece has been distressed by the marriage. She fears losing control of Ashcombe Hall and has imagined enemies where none exist. It was a careful lie because it contained pieces of truth. Clara did fear the marriage, though not because she wished to control the house. She had hidden records in the schoolroom. She had planned to substitute an authentic page for a fraudulent one. Sir Edmund did not need to invent an entirely false woman. He only needed to rearrange her motives until courage resembled greed. Young Bell was brought in last. His swollen cheek had darkened, and the brass archive key no longer hung from his waist. "Mr." Hale asked who had instructed him to remove it. Bell's gaze found Clara's, then dropped. "Miss Ashcombe told me to keep it from Sir Edmund." "And did she ask you to open the relief chest?" "No." "Sir." Sir Edmund's voice hardened. "Think carefully." Bell swallowed. "She said the records must be protected." "Protected from whom?" The clerk's silence gave Sir Edmund room to answer for him. "From the Duke." "Apparently. My niece believed that if the cargo accounts vanished, she could compel His Grace to renegotiate the settlement." Clara saw the trap settle into place. The authentic page hidden in her sleeve earlier. The wrong key displayed before witnesses. The written objection in her hand and the token passed to a servant could all be arranged into a plausible conspiracy. Even her attempt to protect the widow's supplied motive, she might claim the fund belonged under her management and falsify records to keep it there. Mr. Hale ordered the constables to search the servants' quarters and Clara's rooms. Julian could have ended it with a sentence. He could have spoken his name, shown the signet ring hidden inside his bandage, and transformed every person in the room from accuser to supplicant. Yet he remained silent. The evidence against Clara was too precise, and the words he had overheard in the estate office returned to him with unwelcome force. "I intend to deceive the Duke." He believed Sir Edmund corrupt. But belief in one person's guilt did not prove another's innocence. If Clara had prepared a second scheme of her own, revealing himself would warn her before he understood it. He told himself that allowing the search would establish the truth. He told himself that a few minutes of humiliation were a smaller price than binding Rothmere to a practiced deceiver. He did not ask what price Clara had already paid for being doubted by men whose decisions controlled her life. The constables returned with a packet of blank relief receipts from Clara's writing desk and 3 impressions of Rothmere's crest pressed into soft soap. Lydia protested that neither object had been there that morning. Sir Edmund expressed grief. "Mr." Hale expressed satisfaction. Clara looked at the soap impressions and understood why Sir Edmund had removed his signet ring. One impression showed the complete Rothmere crest. Another showed the Ashcombe falcon. The third had been deliberately smeared. But the edge of a broken crown remained visible, the mark of Vane and company. Sir Edmund had not merely planted evidence against her. He had placed the warehouse firm inside the forgery and assumed no one would recognise it. "Mr." Hale declared that Clara would remain confined to her chamber until the Duke arrived and decided whether to pursue charges. Lydia would be kept separately. Bell was dismissed from service pending inquiry. When the constable reached for Clara's arm, Julian stepped forward instinctively. "There is no need to handle her." The room turned toward him. Sir Edmund's eyes narrowed. "A servant accused of conspiracy does not instruct a magistrate." Julian forced himself to lower his head. His hesitation lasted only a heartbeat. But Clara saw it. She had trusted him with the token because she believed he would carry truth to the Duke. Now he stood silent while her guardian converted that trust into proof of guilt. She did not plead with him. That made the shame worse. As the constable escorted her from the drawing-room, Clara passed the windows overlooking the north yard. The 6 chests were no longer beneath the estate office windows. A line of wagons waited beyond the gate, their lamps covered and their horses harnessed for night travel. The accusation had cleared the office, discredited the only people who understood the records, and placed the magistrate's authority between Sir Edmund and further scrutiny. On the nearest wagon, a driver tightened a yellow cord around a wooden token marked with the number 12. The false grain was leaving Ashcombe Hall before the Duke could inspect it. And if the altered schedule was correct, 38 cottages would be emptied before dawn. Clara did not wait for the lock to turn before she began measuring the room. Her chamber had one door, 2 windows, a fireplace too narrow for escape, and a dressing room that shared a wall with the west servants' stair. Sir Edmund had confined her here as a child whenever he wished obedience to appear voluntary. He had forgotten that the old bell-pull no longer rang below. Its frayed cord disappeared through a hole beside the mantel, and dropped into the disused linen passage behind the wall. Clara stripped the silk tie from her curtain, knotted it around the bell cord, and pulled until the decayed plaster cracked. Dust fell over the carpet. A section of moulding loosened, revealing a narrow gap just wide enough for her fingers. She worked without haste, because panic wasted strength. Outside, the constable settled into a chair and scraped mud from his boots. Somewhere below, wagon wheels began to move over the courtyard stones. The moulding came free with a muffled snap. Clara reached into the wall and found the old service cord, then the iron ring once used to secure it. She wrapped the curtain tie around the ring and leaned back until the inner panel of the dressing-room cupboard shifted. Her mother had shown her the passage years ago, not as an escape route, but as evidence of why no household account should be trusted without walking the building itself. Servants once carried warmed linens through the narrow space during winter. Sir Edmund had sealed the entrance after Lady Miriam's death, though he had done it with nails instead of masonry because nails were cheaper. Clara pushed until one tore loose. The sound seemed enormous. The constable paused outside her door. She froze with one hand against the cupboard. After a moment, his boots resumed scraping. The passage smelled of dust, cold stone, and old lavender. Clara slipped inside, pulled the panel nearly closed, and moved sideways through darkness until she reached the stair. She could hear voices below. Sir Edmund was ordering the wagons to take the north road toward the 38 cottages, while Mr. Hale protested that evictions after midnight would appear irregular. Sir Edmund answered that irregularity was preferable to riot. The word stopped Clara more effectively than the locked door had. Grain theft alone would not require cottages to be emptied. He intended to remove the families before the false delivery was discovered, perhaps claiming the tenants had fled with the relief stores. Their absence would make them both victims and suspects. Once the houses stood empty, Ashcombe could transfer the leases to Vane and Company under the settlement's debt provisions. The grain, the forged accounts, and the future date were not separate acts. They were parts of one transaction. She descended to the linen passage and found Lydia waiting behind a rack of sheets. "I knew you would remember the wall," Lydia whispered. Her hair had come loose, and one sleeve was torn where a maid loyal to Sir Edmund had tried to stop her. "Bell is in the old dairy." They took the brass key from him, but he saw where it went, where Sir Edmund gave it to the wagon driver. Clara closed her eyes for one breath. The driver now possessed the only key that could open the county relief chest and create the appearance that official tallies had travelled with the cargo. "We need the parish clerk," she said, "and every widow who can still produce her last numbered receipt. At this hour, especially at this hour, if the cottages are cleared before dawn, their papers will be destroyed or called abandoned property." Lydia caught her wrist. "You cannot reach them before the wagons. Not by road." Clara pulled her mother's notebook from inside her bodice and opened it to an old survey sketch of the North Fields. During the winter floods 6 years earlier, Lady Miriam had ordered a footpath cut along the raised sheep embankment so relief could reach isolated cottages when the main lane became impassable. Sir Edmund later removed the path from the estate map because maintaining it cost money. But the embankment remained. A rider could not take it safely in darkness. A person on foot could. They found Bell in the dairy with his hands tied and his lips split. Clara freed him with a cheese knife and made him repeat everything he had heard. The chests were not filled with grain. 2 contained stones to give weight. 4 held blank leases. Eviction notices and relief receipts already marked with the widow's crosses. The actual grain had been sold 3 days earlier to a vain warehouse at the canal. Sir Edmund planned to claim that the tenants had broken open the chests, stolen the grain, and fled when officers came to seize the cottages. "Did you see the false receipts?" Clara asked. Bell nodded. "Mrs. Pike's cross is wrong. She marks downward first because of her wrist. This one began at the top. It was fragile proof, but it was proof born of habit, not opinion." Clara sent Lydia to the parish clerk with the coal merchant's cart, carrying the genuine receipt schedule and instructions to gather every surviving tally. Bell would take the old footpath to warn the first 12 cottages. Clara would go to the gate and delay the wagons. She stepped into the courtyard just as the lead team began to move. Sir Edmund stood beside Mr. Hale beneath a lantern, issuing final orders. Julian was nowhere in sight. Clara felt the absence as both wound and clarification. She had mistaken his questions for integrity, because she had needed one person in the house to believe her. That error was hers. She would not make it twice. "Stop the wagons," she called. Every head turned. Sir Edmund's face changed from disbelief to fury. "Return to your room. The chests contain no grain." Mr. Hale looked toward the drivers. One of them reached instinctively for his coat, where the brass key made a hard outline beneath the cloth. Clara saw it. So did Sir Edmund. "Search the first chest," she said. "Use the key your driver carries. Then count the sacks before one family is removed." Sir Edmund moved quickly. "She has escaped lawful confinement and now incites interference with county property. Constable, take her." The constable crossed the yard. Clara did not retreat. "If you arrest me before opening the chest, your name will stand on every eviction carried out tonight." "Mr." Hale hesitated. It was the only victory she needed. A horse thundered through the outer gate before the constable reached her. The rider pulled up so sharply that sparks struck from the stones. He wore no servant's coat now. The plain cap was gone, the false bandage stripped away, and on his right hand gleamed the Rothmere signet. Julian dismounted into stunned silence. "Open the chest," he ordered. Sir Edmund recovered first. "Your Grace, my niece has deceived you from the beginning." Julian looked at Clara, and the doubt she had seen in the drawing-room had not vanished. It had become something worse, knowledge of the harm his silence had caused. "Perhaps," he said, "but the authority on those chests is mine, and I will see what was done with it." The driver backed toward the wagon. Clara pointed to his coat. "He has the relief key." The man ran. Julian seized the nearest horse to pursue him, but Clara caught the bridle. "No, let him go north." His gaze snapped to hers. "He carries the key, and he believes the cottages are unprotected. If we chase him, he will flee. If we let him continue, he will open the chest before witnesses and commit himself to the lie." "You mean to use the families as bait?" I mean to reach them first. She gave him the survey page showing the forgotten embankment. Your horses cannot cross this path in darkness, but your authority can hold the main road. Delay the remaining wagons. Send men to the canal warehouse. Bring the magistrate, not soldiers. To the first cottage. Julian looked from the map to her face. And you, I will make certain no widow signs away her home before you arrive. For the first time since revealing himself, he did not command, question, or protect. He handed her his lantern. Clara took it and ran toward the black line of the north fields as the first wagon disappeared beyond the gate. The embankment rose above the flooded pasture as a black ridge beneath Clara's feet, narrow enough that one careless step would send her into the drainage ditch below. Julian's lantern swung from her hand, its light catching wet grass, broken stones, and the pale flash of water between reeds. She ran until her lungs burned, then forced herself to slow. A fall would help no one. Ahead, a cluster of cottage roofs appeared beyond the hedgerow, their chimneys dark despite the cold. Sir Edmund had withheld coal from the same families whose fund he meant to steal. The cruelty of it steadied her. Belle reached the first cottage minutes after she did, bent double and gasping. "Mrs." Pike opened the door with a poker raised in both hands. Her right wrist had stiffened after a mill accident, and Clara saw at once why Belle had remembered the direction of her mark. 2 children peered from behind her skirts. "Men are coming with eviction notices." Clara said, "Do not sign. Do not leave. And do not surrender your receipts. Wake every household along the row." "Mrs." Pike's fear sharpened into anger. She crossed to a wooden box beside the hearth and brought out 3 folded relief slips tied with kitchen string. Each bore her downward, first cross. Witnessed by the parish clerk, a match to a small ash tally carved with the same number. "Your uncle's steward tried to buy these from me last week," she said. "Offered 2 shillings and called them useless scraps." Clara placed the receipts beside her mother's copied schedule. The numbers matched, but the paper did not. The widow's receipts had no blue flax in them because they were private acknowledgements. The false settlement page did. Someone had cut a seal from a public schedule, then used it to disguise a private transfer. Hooves sounded on the main lane. The driver who had fled Ashcombe Hall arrived first, followed by a single wagon. He brought 4 hired men and an iron-bound chest marked with Rothmere's crest. Clara sent Belle behind the cottages with the children and told Mrs. Pike to keep the door barred until the magistrate arrived. Then she stepped into the road alone. The driver pulled the team to a halt. "You are under confinement, and you are carrying a county key you have no right to possess." He touched his coat. "Move aside." "No." The hired men climbed down. None looked eager to strike a gentlewoman. But desperation made poor servants of conscience. Clara raised Julian's lantern, so the crest on the chest and the yellow vein token at the driver's belt could be seen together. "You were told these families would be frightened and isolated," she said. "They are neither. The Duke is coming with the magistrate, and every word you speak now will be heard again before witnesses." The driver laughed, but his eyes shifted toward the road behind him. The Duke authorized the removal. "Then open the chest and show us his grain." His hand went again to the key. Clara understood the mistake before he did. Sir Edmund had trusted the man with the relief key because he needed the chest opened publicly. Yet the false cargo plate came from an old lamp oil shipment. If the lock had also been reused, the county key would not fit. Clara had assumed the key completed the fraud. Perhaps it was meant only to implicate Belle after the driver failed. "Open it," she repeated. He inserted the brass key. It turned once. Caught! And would go no farther. The driver forced it. Metal snapped inside the lock. The broken key trapped half its shaft in the chest. A second set of hoofbeats approached. Faster and heavier. Julian came at the head of 6 estate riders, with Mr. Hale beside him and Lydia in the coal merchant's cart behind. The remaining wagons had been detained at the Ashcombe gate. 2 of Julian's men carried ledgers seized from the canal warehouse. When he saw Clara standing between the driver and the cottage door, something fierce crossed his face. But he dismounted without attempting to move her aside. "You were ordered to open property under my seal," he told the driver. "You have now broken a county key inside a private warehouse lock." The man looked towards Sir Edmund's hired men for help. They stepped away from him. "Mr." Hale examined the chest. The false plate and the broken key. His certainty had begun to rot. Lydia distributed the widow's original tallies across Mrs. Pike's table, while Belle brought witnesses from the neighbouring cottages. The canal ledger provided a second layer. It recorded 180 sacks of grain purchased from Ashcombe stores 3 days earlier and resold before the settlement was signed. Beside the entry appeared the mark of Vane and Company, and a payment reference ending in 12, the same number carved into the yellow token. Julian placed the warehouse book in Clara's hands rather than explaining it himself. "You saw the pattern first." She compared the payment reference with her mother's code book. 12 is not a wagon number. It is an account division. She turned back through the canal ledger until she found older entries. Every 12th account belonged to a creditor purchasing distressed property through an intermediary. Vane was not merely buying grain. They were preparing to acquire the cottages once the tenants appeared to default and flee. Mr. Hale frowned. "That proves Vane's interest. It does not prove Sir Edmund directed it." "No," Clara said. "Not yet." Julian accepted the limitation without argument. That small act of restraint affected her more than a declaration might have. He had doubted her, allowed her rooms to be searched and preserved his disguise while she was publicly accused. Now he did not seek forgiveness by pretending the evidence was stronger than it was. When the others moved outside to secure the wagon, he remained near the cold hearth. "I should have spoken in the drawing room. Yes, I believed silence would reveal the truth. It revealed what you were willing to let happen to me while you decided whether I deserved protection." He took the blow without defence. "I was wrong." Clara folded the warehouse entry carefully. "An apology does not restore Belle's position. Lydia's character or my name. No, but I will. You cannot repair it by commanding everyone to believe me. Then tell me what repair requires." She looked at him fully. Public correction. Belle reinstated with wages for the time lost. Lydia freed from any accusation. The widow's fund placed beyond Sir Edmund's control, and no marriage contract signed until I possess independent counsel and the right to refuse you without losing their homes. The last condition cost him. She saw it in the tightening of his jaw. Not because he resented her freedom, but because his estate still depended upon the marriage portion. He could protect his inheritance or return her choice, but not pretend the two decisions were separate. "You shall have all of it," he said, before Clara could answer. A rider approached from Ashcombe Hall carrying a sealed message. Julian broke it open. Sir Edmund had learned that the canal ledgers were seized and the cottages protected. He had summoned county officials. Vane's solicitor and every principal creditor to Ashcombe Hall for a formal inquiry at noon. Beneath the announcement, in Sir Edmund's own hand, was a final sentence. Miss Ashcombe's forged papers will be produced before them all. He knew they had found the grain accounts, and by noon he intended to destroy Clara with evidence she had not yet seen. By noon, Ashcombe Hall no longer resembled a family home. It had become a court without the protections of one. County officials filled the drawing room. Vane and Company's solicitor occupied the place nearest the fire, and 3 Rothmere creditors sat together beneath the portrait of Clara's mother. Sir Edmund had arranged the chairs so that he stood at the centre, while Clara faced the room alone. Lydia and Belle waited near the door under the watch of a constable. Julian stood beside Clara. Not before her. She had demanded the right to answer for herself, and he had honoured it, though every line of his body suggested how difficult restraint had become. The canal ledger lay on the table beside the widow's tallies, and Clara's written objection to the false inventory. Mr. Hale summarised the night's discoveries: the empty cargo, the private warehouse lock, the broken county key, and the sale of relief grain 3 days before its supposed delivery. Unease moved through the officials. Sir Edmund listened without interruption. When the magistrate finished, he gave a sigh of weary disappointment. All of that would be troubling, he said, if the documents had not been manufactured by my niece. Vane's solicitor opened a leather case and removed 6 account pages, each written in Clara's unmistakable hand. They recorded fictitious purchases of coal, grain and blankets over the previous year. Beside the inflated amounts appeared private instructions directing surplus payments to an account marked Division 12. The final page contained a draft letter to the Duke of Rothmere, proposing that, after their marriage, Clara should take sole control of the county fund and remove Sir Edmund from the relief committee. Her name was signed beneath it. Clara read the first line and felt the room tilt. The handwriting was hers because the sentences had been assembled from pages she had genuinely copied. Whole phrases from her mother's notebooks had been traced and joined together. Even the small hesitation she made before a capital H had been reproduced. Yet the ink appeared aged. The paper bore the proper watermark, and the figures formed a consistent pattern of fraud extending back 12 months. These were found beneath the floorboards of the schoolroom. Sir Edmund said, "The same place where the stolen seals were discovered. They were not there yesterday morning." Lydia said. Sir Edmund turned toward her with practised sorrow. "You have already admitted helping Clara conceal records. I helped her preserve them from you. To the guilty, preservation and concealment often look the same." Vane's solicitor then attacked the canal ledger. It had been seized without a warrant from a warehouse office. Its keeper, who had supposedly recorded the grain purchase, had disappeared during the night. Without him, the solicitor argued, no one could prove when the entry had been written or who authorised it. The yellow token marked 12 was merely a carrier's division marker. The broken crown belonged to Vane's company. But ownership of a token did not establish ownership of a crime. Clara answered each point carefully. She explained the false inventory plate, the impossible weight of the chests and the widow's authentic tallies. The solicitor agreed that irregularities existed, then suggested she had created them to support her accusation. Her knowledge, once dismissed as unfeminine vanity, was now used to make her the only person capable of constructing the fraud. Sir Edmund saved his strongest weapon for last. He produced the genuine brass relief key. It was not broken. The fractured key inside the warehouse lock he declared, had been a household duplicate substituted by Belle. The real county key had been found that morning in Clara's schoolroom, wrapped inside one of her mother's notebooks. Belle stared at it, as though looking at a dead man restored to life. "That is not the key I carried," he said. "Mine had a nick beside the bow. This one has no nick." Clara said, "Because you filed it away." Sir Edmund replied, "Mr. Hale examined the metal and found fresh marks along one edge. The explanation was false, but it was complete enough to survive the room's desire for certainty. By the time Sir Edmund finished, the empty chests were Clara's performance. The stolen grain, an accounting fiction, and the widow's fear, a panic she had deliberately created to prevent her guardian from supervising their fund. One of Julian's creditors rose. "Your Grace, until this matter is settled, the marriage portion cannot be accepted, nor can our loans remain unsecured if the settlement was the foundation of repayment." Julian looked at the man, then at Clara. Rothmere's estates, tenant wages and mine repairs stood on the other side of his next sentence. "The marriage settlement is withdrawn." Sir Edmund's triumph flashed too quickly for most of the room to see. Clara saw it. Julian continued before anyone could speak. "Miss Ashcombe will retain independent counsel and may refuse any future proposal without consequence to the 38 families. Their cottages and winter provisions will be secured from my personal property, not from her inheritance." The creditor went pale. Julian had just placed lands outside the entailed estate at risk. If the loans were called, he could lose the only properties entirely his own. Sir Edmund bowed his head, a noble gesture. "Your Grace," though perhaps unwise when made under a lady's influence. Julian faced the room. "My unwise act was arriving in disguise, withholding my identity, and allowing Miss Ashcombe to be searched while I judged whether she deserved belief. I gave Sir Edmund time to strengthen this accusation. That failure is mine." The admission restored no evidence. It did, however, deny Sir Edmund the claim that Julian's support came from blind romantic loyalty. The Duke had publicly condemned his own conduct before defending hers. Mr. Hale ordered Clara confined not to her chamber, but to the custody of Lady Wexford, a county official's widow, until the forged accounts could be examined. Belle remained dismissed. Lydia's reputation remained under suspicion. Sir Edmund retained temporary control of Ashcombe Hall. As the officials rose, the room accepted his victory with the subdued relief of people grateful to have chosen a villain who possessed less power than he did. Clara was permitted 1 minute to collect her mother's notebook. The constable watched while she opened it. The genuine relief key had been wrapped inside the page, describing transferred wax seals. A faint red stain marked the paper, and beside it lay a shallow crescent where something round had been pressed. She remembered the 3 soap impressions found in her desk, Rothmere's crest, the Ashcombe falcon and the broken crown of Vane. She remembered Sir Edmund's bare finger, the blue fibre running through the false seal, and the identical diagonal cut beneath the settlement page. The soap had not been used to copy Julian's signet. It had been used to copy seals already stolen from 3 separate documents. Sir Edmund could forge their appearance, but not their origin. To defend the papers publicly, he would have to claim when and how each seal had been impressed. One of those claims could not be true. Clara closed the notebook and turned to Julian. "Do not challenge him again tonight." His eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because tomorrow I want him confident enough to identify every document himself." Sir Edmund had won by making Clara's knowledge appear criminal. Now she would make his knowledge impossible. Before sunrise, Clara asked Lady Wexford for 3 things: a sealed writing case, 2 messengers who answered to neither Ashcombe nor Rothmere, and permission to speak privately with every person Sir Edmund had accused. Lady Wexford had spent 30 years watching men disguise convenience as procedure. She granted all 3 without demanding that Clara first prove herself worthy of them. Lydia was sent to Mrs. Pike's cottage with instructions to gather the original relief slips and bring the widows to Ashcombe Hall in separate carts. So no single interception could silence them all. Bell travelled under one messenger's protection to the parish clerk, who was ordered to bring the tally-cutting knife, the register of issued numbers, and the wooden block upon which each recipient's mark had been witnessed. Julian dispatched the second messenger to Rothmere's southern estate for the original lamp oil inventory corresponding to plate R4719. Clara did not tell Sir Edmund what she sought. She allowed him to believe she had nothing left but accusation. At 11, the drawing-room filled again. This time the doors remained open, and tenants crowded the entrance hall beyond them. Sir Edmund objected that a financial inquiry should not become a spectacle. Clara answered that the alleged theft concerned public relief and had already been used to threaten public eviction. Lady Wexford ruled that those whose homes had been placed at risk possessed the right to hear how it had been done. Julian stood near the rear of the room among his creditors, rather than at Clara's side. His presence protected the proceedings from being quietly ended. But the argument remained hers. Sir Edmund attacked first. He repeated that Clara had forged accounts, planted false cargo marks, and manipulated vulnerable widows to seize control of the relief fund. He displayed the 6 incriminating pages written in her hand and invited the room to compare them with her mother's notebooks. No stranger could reproduce these habits, he said. Only Clara possessed the skill, access, and motive. Clara approached the table. Then let us begin with time. She placed the false accounts in chronological order. Each page recorded a supposed purchase on a different date, yet every sheet bore the same narrow crease across its lower corner. Sir Edmund claimed the papers had been written and hidden over 12 months. Clara showed that the crease passed through ink on some pages and beneath ink on others. They had been folded together first, then written at different stages to imitate age. That does not identify the writer. Vane's solicitor said, "No, it identifies preparation rather than accumulation." She turned to Access. The schoolroom had been called her private hiding place. Yet Sir Edmund had known where to search and had entered it before any independent witness arrived. The constable admitted that the loose board was already raised when he entered. Lydia testified that Clara stored copied schedules there. But no seals, soap impressions, or blank receipts had been present before her confinement. Sir Edmund dismissed both women as accomplices. Clara did not argue. She lifted the altered cargo plate. The messenger from Rothmere's southern estate had arrived minutes earlier, with the original lamp oil register, its seal still intact. The entry for R4719 described a chest with 2 iron straps, a cracked left hinge, and a plate secured by 4 screws. The chest seized at Ashcombe possessed the same repaired hinge and the outline of 4 original holes beneath a shorter 2-screw plate. The object existed before my alleged scheme, Clara said. It belonged to Rothmere and passed into Vane custody after the lamp oil was sold. Someone with access to Vane's warehouse altered it before the wagon reached Ashcombe. The solicitor rose. Vane owns hundreds of old chests. Miss Ashcombe could have obtained one, while confined under her guardian's authority, without money. transport or permission. He sat down. Clara called Bell. His testimony remained dangerous because Sir Edmund had already branded him disloyal. She therefore asked him no question concerning motives. She asked only how relief tallies were cut. Bell demonstrated with the parish knife. Every official tally carried a shallow notch on the left edge, because the blade's tip had broken 2 winters earlier. The yellow vein token had no such notch. The unbroken brass key produced from Clara's schoolroom also lacked the wear pattern visible in the parish register's wax impressions. It was a recent duplicate, not the key used for years by Bell and his predecessor. Sir Edmund's voice sharpened. You expect this room to trust a dismissed clerk's recollection over physical evidence? No. Clara replied. I expect them to trust the physical evidence over your description of it. A murmur moved through the tenants. Sir Edmund's control began to fray. Clara placed the 3 soap impressions on black velvet Rothmere's crest. The Ashcombe falcon and Vane's broken crown. Yesterday. You said these proved I copied the Duke's signet to forge the settlement and cargo records. You also said the relief seal found in the schoolroom had been cut from a document I stole. I said precisely that, and the Vane impression, taken from the carrier's token after you obtained it. The room became still. Clara had never pressed the wooden token into soap. She had placed it in Julian's hand in the corridor, where Sir Edmund had seen it only from several yards away. The soap impressions were found in her desk before the token was removed from Julian's pocket. Sir Edmund could not have known that the broken crown would produce that precise shape unless he had already handled the original Vane seal from which both the token and the forged documents were copied. His solicitor leaned toward him. But Sir Edmund raised a hand. She told the servant what the mark was. Julian spoke from the rear. She did not. Sir Edmund turned on him. You were conspiring with her. I was still disguised, and still doubted her. I remember every word because my silence afterward disgraced me. Clara let the admission settle. Then she brought forward the false settlement page with the blue flax beneath Rothmere's wax and the relief fragment found in the schoolroom. Both carried the same diagonal cut. Sir Edmund had described one as the seal originally attached to the settlement and the other as the discarded remainder Clara had hidden. A seal cannot remain whole on one document, Clara said, while its matching half is found elsewhere. Sir Edmund stared at the 2 pieces. His first mistake was looking toward Vane's solicitor. His second was saying, the cut was made after the settlement reached this house. No one had stated where the cut was made. Clara placed her mother's code book beside the wax. Then you must explain how you knew that. Sir Edmund, before the document's journey has been authenticated, Lady Wexford signalled to the parish clerk, who carried forward a sealed dispatch register and a small packet wrapped in oilcloth. Inside lay the item Clara had requested before dawn, the original county schedule from which the blue flax seal had been removed. Its dispatch date would establish who possessed it when the wax was cut. Clara rested her hand upon the unopened register. Now we shall see whether the seal reached Ashcombe before the Duke's settlement, or whether you carried it here yourself. The parish clerk broke the oilcloth seal and opened the dispatch register where every county relief document had been entered before leaving his office. The room leaned toward him as he traced the line with one ink-darkened finger. The original blue flax schedule had not been sent to Clara, Bell, or any servant under their authority. It had been delivered directly to Sir Edmund Ashcombe 6 weeks earlier. On the same morning that Vane and Company issued its final demand against Ashcombe Hall, the clerk produced the matching receipt. Sir Edmund's signature stood beneath the date. Beside the impression of the Ashcombe falcon, Clara then lifted the original schedule from the packet. A section of wax had been cut from its lower edge at the same diagonal angle visible beneath the forged marriage settlement. The missing piece matched the fragment supposedly discovered beneath her schoolroom floor. Sir Edmund had possessed the public document before the Duke's contract existed, had removed its seal, and later divided that seal between the false settlement and the evidence planted against her. Sir Edmund stared at the register. A signature proves receipt, not misuse. No, Clara said. The misuse is proved by what followed. She arranged the evidence in the order of its journey, rather than the order in which it had been discovered. The county schedule had gone from the parish clerk to Sir Edmund. Its seal had been cut and attached to a private transfer page designed to move the widow's fund into Ashcombe debts. The old Rothmere lamp oil chests had passed into Vane's warehouse after lawful sale, where their 4 screw plates were removed and replaced with shorter estate markers. Those chests returned under freshly burned Rothmere crests, allowing Sir Edmund to claim that the Duke had delivered relief grain. The grain itself had already been sold through Vane 3 days earlier. The yellow token linked the carrier to Division 12. The department Vane used to purchase distressed leases through intermediaries. The empty cottages would then be recorded as abandoned after their occupants were accused of stealing grain that had never entered the chests. You did not intend merely to take the widow's money, Clara said. You intended to take their homes, transfer the leases to Vane, and use the Duke's marriage settlement to conceal both losses beneath a single payment. The Vane solicitor rose slowly. Sir Edmund proposed the transfer as protection against default. My company was told the tenants had already fled. Mrs. Pike pushed through the open doors, her stiff wrist pressed against the frame. He sent men to remove us before midnight. Other widows raised their numbered tallies. Bell placed the parish knife beside them, showing the broken tip that had marked every genuine piece of ash for 2 winters. None of the forged receipts carried that notch. Mr. Hale examined the evidence with increasing horror, understanding that his authority had nearly turned theft into lawful eviction. Who prepared the false crosses, he asked. Sir Edmund's driver, detained under guard since dawn. Looked toward Vane's solicitor and then toward his employer. Sir Edmund gave us the old receipts, he said. He said the women would be gone before anyone compared them. Sir Edmund rounded on him. You lying coward! The outburst stripped away the last of his practised sorrow. Clara did not need a confession. His deadline, access, forged custody chain and intended benefit had already been established through independent records. Objects and witnesses. His final mistake had come from contempt. He had believed Clara's knowledge could be turned against her, because no man in authority would distinguish skill from guilt. Lady Wexford ordered the constables to take him into custody for fraud, misappropriation of public relief, conspiracy to dispossess tenants, and fabrication of evidence. The driver was detained as an accomplice, but promised consideration for his testimony. Vane's solicitor surrendered the Division 12 account books to avoid sharing Sir Edmund's fate. Mr. Hale publicly withdrew every accusation against Clara, Lydia, and Bell, then admitted that he had accepted a guardian's standing in place of examination. Julian stepped forward only after Clara had finished. There remains another wrong to correct. Before the officials, creditors, servants, and tenants, he stated that Clara had warned him of the altered seal while believing him to be a servant. He had concealed his identity, tested her honesty without her consent, and remained silent when that concealment allowed Sir Edmund to accuse and confine her. My fear of being deceived became permission to deceive her. He said, My past explains that choice. It does not excuse it. He reinstated Bell with full wages and placed the relief records under Bell and the parish clerk's joint custody. He issued Lydia a written public character under his seal and Lady Wexford's witness. The 38 cottages were removed permanently from Ashcombe collateral and transferred into a protected trust whose tenants could not be displaced for debts they had not incurred. To fund it, Julian surrendered his unentailed hunting estate to the creditors and sold the London house his father had prized. Rothmere would survive with less land, fewer rooms, and no marriage portion from Clara. Then he placed the unsigned contract on the table and cut his seal from it himself. Miss Ashcombe owes me neither her inheritance nor her hand. Whatever she chooses. These corrections remain. For the first time since her mother's death, Clara's future no longer depended upon obedience disguised as gratitude. Ashcombe Hall would be sold to repay lawful creditors, but Lady Wexford offered Lydia a permanent position. Bell retained his work, and the tenants kept their homes. Clara received control of her maternal inheritance. Under counsel, she selected herself. She used part of it to establish an independent county office where relief accounts could be inspected by the women whose names filled them. Julian asked for nothing while the arrangements were completed. He wrote only once, stating that he would answer any question she chose to ask, and accept silence if that was her answer. 3 months later, he came to the new relief office without disguise. Clara sat inside the half-open door, with the blue flax schedule framed above her desk, not as evidence of disgrace, but as a reminder that authority should always leave a trace. Julian stopped on the threshold, rather than entering uninvited. "I intend to advise the Duke," she said, looking up from the accounts. "Should he be alarmed deeply? His northern tenants require new drainage channels, and his steward's estimates are absurd." A cautious smile touched his face. "May I come in?" Clara considered him long enough that he understood the answer was hers alone. Then she opened the door fully and indicated the chair beside her rather than the one opposite. "You may sit," she said, "but I will examine every page before I sign anything." I would expect nothing less. Their hands met over an unsealed ledger, not as rescuer and rescued, debtor and fortune, duke and dependent, but as two people choosing the same work and accepting its cost. This time, no one listened from the shadows. Nothing between them required disguise.